That's great. Thank you, Kate. I'm going to try and share some slides, and I haven't sent them to you in advance, Kate, but I will send them. Um, and I can't do that. That's all right. I'll send them to you another time, but
That's no problem yet.
I
You should
can
be.
I can work through them. Um, Thanks ever so much. Thank you for asking me in to tell you about the things that we've done. As Kate said, I'm Rick Waits. I'm the executive head teacher at Monk Fryston and Saxton schools, but I'm going to tell you about the things we've done at Monk Fryston. Um, we embarked on a project 4 years ago um, to look at carbon neutrality across the public buildings in the village. And I was approached 2018, 2019 to ask if we could be part of it. And I pushed back at that time and said we weren't ready because if we're going to do it, we need to make sure we're devoting time and energy and we're going to do it properly. And so we deferred by a year and then put it on our school development plan. That was one of the big drivers for us for that year. And the whole purpose was to achieve carbon neutrality. And we wanted to look at how the buildings in our village that had community access could become carbon neutral. So that's the community centre, the school, the church, and the sports clubs. Um, and together we created a shared vision about what we wanted to achieve. And I have to stress it was carbon neutrality. Um, the cost wasn't the factor. And increasingly, we're seeing that with the financial squeeze and the energy crisis, cost is becoming really important to people. But that wasn't our driver. We wanted to see how we could change, and it's interesting hearing Bryony talk about change, how we could change our behaviours in our location and influence and change other people's perceptions as well. And a lot of that came about because our children were telling us that that's really important to them. They were concerned about climate change, but they wanted to do their bit. So over a number of years, they have asked us to recycle, and we recycle widely. They've looked at energy use and efficiency, but only on a very micro scale. We wanted to do that much in a much grander way. So just a bit of context for us, we're a one form entry primary school, so we've got 7 classes. The building is a single story building built in 1999, so 25 years old. Um, and there are some benefits to that. It was built with fairly decent insulation. It's not current standard, but it was decent, and we've got double glazing, and we've got underfloor heating in the classroom areas. 7 classrooms, a hall, and some ancillary rooms, meeting rooms, etc. Um, the heating and hot water were entirely driven by 2 huge gas boilers that were massive and guzzled gas. And as you can imagine, in a primary school where we've got to maintain high levels of warmth, etc., we were using a huge amount of gas and quite a lot of electricity as well. So before we started the project, our gas use was about 165,000 kilowatts a year. And electricity use was about 58,000 kilowatts a year. So it's quite high energy consumption there. And we wanted to find out what we could do, what options were open to us to reduce that. And so we collectively, as a project, embarked on a feasibility study to look at our use, look at our buildings, and ask experts what options were open to us. And then individually, we looked at what might be achievable for our buildings. And what was really clear through that feasibility process was that we needed a whole building approach. And that sort of changed our view on it slightly because it was clear we've got 2 big gas boilers and we want to get rid of the gas boilers, but we didn't think about the other changes that we could make. And actually, it became really, really clear as we went through, we had to make those other changes or the impact and the effect would be diminished. So it took me in a slightly different direction, looking at other things that I hadn't considered before. We involved the children in that. So the project brought thermal imaging camera, and the children went around the school and identified where the hotspots were and where we were losing heat. And that was really interesting. It was great for them because that was a practical example, and they were fascinated at seeing all the colours on the screen and the fact that they could see we were losing huge amounts of energy. But there were bits there that we hadn't really taken into account as much. So a real example of that was that we've got double glazing throughout. But the double glazing is in wooden frames. And over the 25 years, the wooden frames have deteriorated and there's rot in there. Actually, it's quite horrendous now. But then we hadn't appreciated quite how much heat loss there was through those frames. And so if we were going to have an efficient system and make the heating work better, we needed to keep the heat in. So that led us down the path of looking at insulation and windows and thermal use as well. So we developed a strategy, and we found a solution that we thought was right for us, where we wanted to replace the boilers with a ground source heat pump. And we knew that that would tie into our existing heating system, so we could retrofit it, because that was a bit of a challenge for us, because the old plant rooms and boiler rooms weren't necessarily set up for this sort of infrastructure, but we knew that would work. We knew that it would feed the underfloor heating system well. And we also knew that it has a long expected lifespan, so it was going to be a sustainable solution. But whilst we did that, we also had to reduce our energy use through electricity. So we had to look at LED lighting and where else we can cut back on the electricity use that we've got, and look at the heat loss. So we started to replace the windows and the glazing units, which is a huge job, because 25 years ago, the architect felt it was great to have lots of natural light, which is lovely, but it means lots of windows to replace. And by necessity, we've got to have a lot of those doors open to allow access to the building during break times and lunch times. And that's just allowing all the heat to go. So we had to find a way to cap that as well. We looked at the insulation, and we think it's adequate at the moment. We can improve it, but it's adequate. So that's something that we've got that we'll probably look at later, but there's no urgency for that. The ground source heat pump would remove the gas use, fossil fuels in that respect, but it would increase electricity use because the pump has to run continuously. And so we then also had to look at solar as a way to offset some of that increase in electricity use. So where we thought we had just one solution that we needed to look at, actually it spiraled, and we had lots of different things. And it was good that we noted that at the start of the project, because we were able to plan for that progressively. I guess the biggest barrier to us, and this is common for everyone, I guess, is finance, because school budgets are increasingly squeezed. We have very little capital expenditure funding anymore, very little spare to put towards this. So we had to find a way to do it. We did get support from the Multi-Academy Trust, and they are helping with some of the building's conditions improvements, so replacing windows and doors and things like that. But we put a large bid into the public sector decarbonisation scheme funding, and we're successful, which I'm really pleased with, because I pioneered that and I did that myself, which was a huge learning curve for me. And there were many times that I felt like giving up, and actually got really cross a number of times, to the point where I raised it with the MP who brought it up with the energy minister, and it got raised in Parliament, because it shouldn't be stopping people applying because it's too complicated. The money is there to use for this, and this was the right use for it. It is overly bureaucratic, and we've had lots of pain thresholds we've got to get through with that. But it was really, really worth it. And the support we've got through that has been massive. And because of that, we've encouraged other people to do it as well. So we have a ground source heat pump installed. That went in 2 years ago. We had 8 boreholes drilled 100 meters down. Fantastic piece of machinery that came, and there was very little disruption, which really surprised me. They came over the summer holidays and they drilled these 8 boreholes down. The ambient temperature in the ground maintains a level of temperature in the heating circuit. That's then circulated and electrically heated to a higher level, sort of the reverse technology of a fridge, I guess is the best way to describe it. And we took a leap of faith with it. We hoped that the circuit would be big enough to heat the school, and we hoped that, and the professionals did assure us it would work, that it would be warm enough, and it is. And so over the last 2 winters, it's been really warm within school. We've maintained a really good level of heat. In the summer, it actually cools it down as well because the temperature going through the floor is a bit cooler. So we've benefited both ways. In the winter, we have the exhaust, if you like, from the heat pump process heats the hot water. And so that's reduced costs on the hot water generation. So the system is efficient in that way. We also installed a computerized controls unit so that we can control each circuit quite specifically to make sure we're getting maximum efficiency from that. And that's working really well. We installed solar last year. We haven't got a battery yet. It's only solar generation. And unfortunately, we're generating the most power when we least need it for the heating, but it has helped. We've installed LED lighting in all of the units throughout school. And that was a big undertaking, but it's had a big impact. And we've installed thermal curtains over the existing doorways, so we've reduced draft loss that way. Throughout that process, we involved our children. So the children formed a team of eco-warriors, and the eco-warriors have an annual election process. They can stand again if they want to, but the team is representative across the school. They audit the environmental aspects of the school, the infrastructure, and the education, and then work on an action plan each year for things that they want to achieve. And when we started this project, they were very, very keen on looking at the energy. So they wanted to move this process forward. They help drive it. They help monitor it. So they take monthly energy readings that we feed into a tracker so we can track the use of that and see whether there's been any increase in use or decrease. They've got an energy code that they put together, so they encourage people to switch things off and maintain good energy efficiency. The impact of this has been really quite pronounced. So our fuel use has decreased significantly. We displaced 150,000 kilowatts a year of gas use. Gas was almost eradicated. I want to cut the gas off altogether, but I've got one aging cooker in the kitchen that we use for the school dinners, and we've got to keep it on. We can't put an electric cooker in just at the moment, so we've got to keep the gas on for that, but that's the only use we have. Electricity use did increase, and it increased to 71,000 kilowatts a year, which we knew was going to happen. And that's one of the reasons that solar was put in to offset against that. And the LED lighting brought that down. I set out at the start to say we were aiming for carbon neutrality, not financial impact, because if we'd looked at a financial payback on this, we'd never been able to make it work. And of course, during the time we installed it, all of the energy prices increased. But if I did an indicative sort of hypothetical calculation on it, at the 2020 rates changed over the technology. If we carried that use forward, we'd now be £5,700 a year better off. Of course, the energy prices have increased, so it doesn't quite look that way now. But if we kept those prices all the way through, we'd be nearly £6,000 a year better. We have tracked that energy use over 4 years, and we can see it really dropping off, which is great. And the children look at that and do their bit to keep it low. And we're looking at what more we can do to improve that. So we're looking at display systems because we think, tie in our live energy use onto a big screen so that children can see it and see where they can make a difference, and that difference can be shown really rapidly. One of the big impacts was in our community engagement. So the community project maintained a regular update that is distributed in paper form to all houses in the village, and that generated significant interest. So we've also held community forums, so people have come along, and I know Kate and Chris have both been to those and have seen how people are interested in what we've done and are inspired by that, have got ideas for their own home. And I'm the same. And going back to Bryony's change, that gave me a motivation. So personally, my home energy use has changed because I've learned those lessons, and that's motivated me. And I know that a number of our families have done that as well. So when we put the heat pump in, we had an open event with the agreement of the contractors, and we had 50 or 60 people come along to see what was going on and to look at and talk about the solution, because they were really interested in that. And I hope that that's inspired them to go on and make a change in their own homes as well. Chris indicated when I came on the call, we've achieved lots of awards, and we have. In the first year, we got the Eco Schools Green Flag Award, which we were really proud of. But then the second year, we got it with merit, and this year we got it with distinction. So each year, we're just incrementally increasing and improving because we're doing more and more, and that's recognising the difference the children are finding in the school. And we've also, we're case studies on the Ashton Let's Go Zero website and the Salix Finance and PSDS websites as well. I think in terms of the lessons I've learned, it is important to consider the whole building, because a solution can't be taken in isolation. If we just put a heat pump in and ignored all the heat loss, I don't think we'll get the sort of level of comfort that we've got now. The solutions are out there, and the funding is usually out there. There are pain barriers to go through to find it and obtain it, unfortunately. But it does take a lot of effort. It does take a lot of energy, but searching and working hard enough, we can find some solutions. And I'm saying that with a bit of confidence in that we sort of trailblazed this a little bit in our area. And since we've done this successfully, 3 other schools have followed the same route and applied successfully for the same funding and applied ground source heat pumps. So we know that it's positive. We know it's there, but it is really hard. I get that. The other thing that I found was nobody told me to start with that the energy supply into school is a finite load. So when we increased the electrical drain, it blew the fuses on the supply into school. They were aging fuses that were going anyway, and they've been fine since, but it did tell us we were at the threshold. So we're now looking for future improvements, including charging points for electric cars, etc. And we haven't got the load. So we'd have to look at upgrading that before we can install anything new. And nobody mentioned that before. So I've got to consider things like that. And the other thing that I think we've learned from this is we've got to be brave. There were people telling us that it wouldn't work. There were people telling us we're going to lose the school field because we're going to dig it up with boreholes and things. But we trusted people and took that leap of faith. And because of that, and because we had that courage, I think we've had lots of success from it.
Thank you so much, Rick. It's just so inspiring, like everything you've achieved there. Kath, did you have a question? You've got, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic. Really, really impressive. I just wondered, the other schools in the multi-academy trust, are those the ones that have followed suit, or is it other schools within other MATs?
These ones that I know of are in the multi-academy trust. So we've got 3 in our trust that have now installed heat pumps. There have been other schools who've been in contact with us to talk about our solution and whether it would work for them, but I've not then followed that up to find out whether they actually did anything with it.
And thank you. And with regards to the funding, I did have a quick look while you were talking about the PSD funding that Sue she mentioned the actual funding source. It looked like it's kind of come to a bit of a halt. Is that because of change of government, or because it's always a mystery, isn't it, working out where funds come from?
Yeah, it is. I don't know where they're at with it, to be honest. We applied when we applied, they had a phased rollout, and they only gave indicative dates when they'd release the next one, but it was never really firm. So I had to keep looking out for that. We saw the release for the second phase. We applied and were unsuccessful. We were then successful in the third phase, but I think it's still the same with them. They don't schedule when the next release date will be. It will be at some point in the future. I think that's to do with government funding streams.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else got any questions for Rick? No? I mean, yes, Chris, go on.
Well, I'm just interested if you've seen a change in the conversations you're having with the children over the term of the project, as they become more aware, and you've really brought all the school with you on it. Has there been, I don't know if I'm more of a sophisticated approach that they've sort of narrowed down in what they're wanting to focus on, or is it? I'm just intrigued.
Yes, they probably have. I think they have developed confidence that we're moving in the right direction. They understand what's there and why we've done it, and a sort of they've almost parked it. It's almost like, yeah, we know we've done that. That's okay, but we need to do this bit next. So we're really interested in biodiversity and improving the grounds and the habitats, because we know the energy has been worked on. We're going to sustain that, but we really want to focus on recycling, litter, and biodiversity. That was interesting last year because they did the audit. They knew the scores for energy were quite high, so they sort of said, right, let's park that. Let's look at something different.
Nicely keeping you on your toes, Rick. I like the sound of that.
Oh, there's never a dull moment. Yeah, really do keep me going.
That is brilliant, though, isn't it? Because that's inspiration in itself, isn't it? That they can move into, well, with a renewed confidence in a way. Well, if we can tackle that, come on, world peace now. Come on, Rick. I'm sure they're not allowed to call you Rick, but you know what I mean, Mr. Waits. Sorry.
I think just sort of how all the buildings came together, I think, was a really great starting point in Monk Fryston and Hillam as well, because there's a lot to be sort of gained, isn't there, from sharing. I mean, perhaps the school is slightly different, but the community buildings, for example, even to the extent of looking what unit price you're paying for your energy and thinking, God, why are they getting it so much cheaper? And then, you know, sharing that information so someone else can get cheaper prices, coming together to get a feasibility study done that covers all the buildings. And again, all 4 buildings, because if you look at all community buildings together and the school and what reach you have into the community, loads and loads of local residents, and acting as that exemplar and sharing that learning, as you've said, makes a real difference to what people do in their own homes. I just think it's such a brilliant success story, and really appreciate you coming along today to tell us about it, Rick. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking me. I'll hang around for a bit, but I will need to go to leave that assembly. But thank you, Kate.
Lovely. Thank you, Rick. Fabulous.